Alright, so I'm back here. Let's wrap up this little chapter here on glass using the architectural shader. Okay, so this is what we had. This is the render result that we have from the previous video. We're going to go ahead and wrap this up now. Okay, now I did mention in the previous video that under the refraction parameters here for the wine glass material that we have these advanced refraction parameters. Now we haven't used any of these advanced parameters so far in this chapter with dealing with the architectural shader. So we're going to actually do that now. These are the default settings that you see here. We can actually change this stuff around, which I'm going to do here, and I'm going to show you the results here. Let's save out the current render image here, and I'm going to turn on use max distance. Okay, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the max distance here. Now it's set to 0, which pretty much puts an unlimited max distance. Now the max distance is set up in scene units. Okay, so what you ideally want to do is, if I minimize this render view window, is actually measure out the glass here of the wine glass here, the thickness of it. Okay, and you can do that actually pretty easy. Mine actually comes with measuring tools. If you simply come up here to the create menu on the main menu bar up here, you can go to measure tools, and you can choose a few different measure tools. What you want to use is the distance tool, and then you can use that to measure out the thickness of this wine glass here, and then you can use that thickness here as the max distance. So why would you want to do that? Well, instead of sitting here and explaining for 20 minutes, I'm just going to go ahead and show you. Let's bring out the render view. This will make more sense to you once you see it actually render in action. So I'll set the max distance of 1. So 1 unit's going to be pretty good. Okay, and for the rest of this stuff, I'm just going to leave alone, at least for now. So let's go ahead and let's do a render region of this. Okay, so you notice a difference here. If we go back to the before image down here, this is what we had before without using any of the advanced refraction parameters, and this is what we have after. See that? There's a huge difference. Basically what this does is it actually cuts off the refraction rays at whatever max distance you set, which can actually be realistic because light does sort of decay and weaken as it goes through different types of mediums or interfaces, in this case this wine glass. Okay, so you can actually use this parameter to adjust and alter the way that the light's going to refract through this wine glass, which can lead to more realistic and more interesting results. So what I'm going to do is, you notice that as the light refraction decays over here, we can see this sort of black was introduced. If I go to the before image, there is no black right there. We just see right through it, and we see that gray liquid in there, which will change in a moment, by the way. Now we see this black right here. What we can do is use the color at max distance parameter, and what you ideally want to do is, you can do this, you can actually choose any color you want. So let's say we choose a bright red. Let's go ahead and do a render region of this. And this is what we get. We get this bright red type of material here. Okay, this looks pretty interesting, but it's not what we want for the wine glass. Although if you wanted to have a red wine glass, you could. Okay, so what I'm going to do is instead, I'm going to come up here to the diffuse. I'm going to open up the color chooser here for the color at max distance, and I'm going to click on this little icon here, this little eyedropper icon, color picker, and I'll just click on the color swatch up here for the diffuse. What you ideally want to do is use the same color for the color at max distance that you're using for the diffuse color to keep this thing physically accurate. You don't have to, that's the beauty of mental ray, but you want to if you want to stick with physical accuracy. Okay, so if you were doing, let's say, a soft light blue glass, you would want the color at max distance to match with the color that you have set up here for the diffuse. In this case, it's almost black, so we don't see much of a difference there. All right, but this works out pretty well. If we change that max distance, say to something like 0.01, let me render this out again. So just so that this makes more sense, that's why I'm doing these render previews. We can see it comes out totally dark. That's because max distance is so short that the light rays can't refract through it all the way. So applying this max distance can actually cut off how far those rays can actually refract through the glass. So you're here using a max distance of 0.1, darkens it up. You can still see through it, but the light actually is decaying through this thing, and it's using the color that we use at the color at max distance parameter. So I'm going to go back to using a value of 1, re-render that again. Okay, so I'm pretty happy with the way that glass is looking. It's looking really nice. Let me close that. What I'm going to do now is, let me close that as well. I'm going to select the liquid inside, and I'm going to right click, go to assign new material, and we'll apply new material X to it. Okay, and this one we're going to call, I guess we'll just call this one wine, the wine material, since it's the actual wine. And copy that over for the shading group. Okay. Alright. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take, let's have a look at this color here. And what I'll do is I'll take this color and let's change it here. Let's switch to RGB. And for the red channel, let's use about 0.2. For the green, we'll go with 0.02. Make it really dark. Not a lot of green there. And for the blue channel, let's go also with 0.02. It's basically going to be this dark red type of material, which will try to mimic the color of our wine here. So we're doing some dark red wine. Now, the weight, what I'm going to do with the weight is, I'll leave it at 1 just for now. Okay. Now, reflection, I'm going to go ahead and give this full reflectivity, no glossiness. And advanced reflection, I'll leave that stuff alone. Now refraction, we have to make this obviously transparent because it's a liquid and we can see through it. So I'll give it some transparency. Now I'll leave the color alone. Now the index of refraction, I'm going to go for a value of 1.339. And that's a value that I found during a Google search. I was looking for different indices of refraction for different types of wines. And depending on the wine you're trying to imitate, different wines have different indices of refraction. So in this case, I decided to go with 1.339, which was just one index of refraction that I found among so many during a search on the internet. I actually forgot the name of the specific wine, so sorry about that to all you wine enthusiasts out there. Let's go down here. Now, refraction, advanced refraction, we are going to use some of these advanced refraction parameters. Okay, now BRDF, I'm going to turn on Fresnel reflections, very important. And ambient occlusion, I'm not going to use any ambient occlusion for this shader. Okay, so let's go back over here, open up the render view, and do another render region here, and see what we have now with this wine material. And this is what we end up with. Doesn't look too great. And the problem is, you notice the color is the first thing that you look at, and you go, wait, the color's wrong. Well, despite the fact that we gave it color here in the diffuse color slot, because it's completely transparent, okay, the color isn't going to affect the shader at all. So basically, we wasted our time and effort placing a color in the diffuse color parameter. So how in the world can we adjust the color of this wine material if it's completely transparent? Well, the way that we can do that is using the advanced refraction parameters. So let's turn on use max distance, and let's go ahead and leave the distance at 0 for now. And we'll turn on use color at max distance. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up the color chooser here. I'm going to use the eyedropper tool, and I'm going to click on the color swatch up here for the diffuse color, which is that dark red that we created before. I'll hit accept, and I'll render again. And now we should get some color in here due to the fact that we're using this parameter now. And you can see that no, we don't have anything here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and go to max distance here, and I'm going to give this a max distance of about 2. Okay, and now let's go ahead and render this out again. Now we can see that our liquid is looking red the way it's supposed to. Okay, excellent, awesome. Okay. And the reason for that is because we gave it a max distance. You always want to give this some kind of a max distance. Never leave it at 0 because it's not going to work out for you. Give it a max distance of whatever you feel is necessary. And this max distance can be anything. If I shorten this max distance to say 0.2, let's save out this image so we can compare it. Do another render region. What you get is a very, very dark material that you can't You can barely see through, if at all. Actually, we can't even see through that. So let's actually give it 1, a value of 1, which was half of what we originally had, which was a value of 2 before. And now you notice that the material is very dark. It's very hard for the light to go through that material. If we go to the before, this is what it looked like before at a value of 2. Here's a value of 1. Okay, the shorter we cut that distance down, the harder it is to see through the liquid. See that? It's almost like it becomes more dense, less transparent basically. Okay, so I'm going to leave that at a distance of 2. And before I do any other renders, I want to show you something. If I zoom in here a bit, this is very interesting. You notice that toward the edge of the liquid, you can see through it more. It becomes more transparent and more clear. When you're looking at the liquid in a more dense area, like right here, head on, you notice that the liquid appears to be darker. That is actually the correct behavior of how light refracts through a transparent object. In this case, the liquid from the wine. Okay, this is the physically correct way of rendering out a situation where you have liquid inside of glass. And this is actually the correct way of refracting light rays through the glass or through any transparent objects in your scenes when you're working in Maya or basically any 3D package. So what you're seeing here is physically correct, and it's kind of scary because I see a lot of tutorials and a lot of stuff on the internet that tries to show people how to do this kind of stuff, and they don't talk about how the light rays refract and how they decay over an interface or a medium like this. They pretty much skip all that stuff and don't even talk about it at all, and that is incorrect. That's wrong. It's false information. This is actually the correct physical way of rendering out this type of situation or this type of object in 3D with mental ray. So you want to keep that in mind. Very important for whenever you want to do photorealistic, believable renders of wine and liquids and glass and stuff like that. Always use these advanced refraction parameters whenever you're doing any type of thick glass that has thickness to it, whether it's wine glass or a glass table, anything like that. Okay, all right. So I'm gonna leave that like so. Looks pretty good. Now let's go ahead and let's apply the material to any other glass objects in our scene. So let's close the attribute editor. We'll close that render. And the other object that I'm talking about is this vase over here. Okay, so let's get rid of that nasty gray Lambert shader. Let's right click, go to assign new material, and we'll apply material X to it. And we'll just call this, I guess we'll just call this vase matte. Okay, copy the name. We'll paste it over here for the shading group. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's do this. Let's bring out the render view here. Click on the snapshot icon there, and let's do a render region of this vase here. Okay, and there we go. All right. Okay, so let's start adjusting this. For the color, let's go ahead and knock the color down to a little bit of a darker gray. Really doesn't matter, just a little bit darker like so. The weight, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to knock that weight down to 0. This is going to be a transparent object. Reflectivity, let's give this full reflectivity. It is going to be a glass vase. And let's go ahead and leave that alone for now. Advanced reflection, what I want to do is turn off the skip reflection on inside parameter. And for refraction, let's go with an index of refraction of 1.6. Again, this is just another value of an index of refraction I found on the internet for a type of glass. Different types of glass has different types of index of refraction. It's very important to notice that. And transparency, I'll make it completely transparent here. Okay, and close that. BRDF, let's go ahead and I'm going to turn that on. We're not going to do ambient occlusion. And then there's this other parameter down here called translucency. Now let's go ahead and let's render this out. See what we have here. Okay, that looks pretty nice. Now this translucency parameter is pretty interesting, so let me go ahead and show you how that works. I'll turn it on, and I'll simply do another render region here. And you can see that the object becomes translucent. And we can control the amount of translucency here using this weight parameter, and we can control the color using just this color parameter. So it's actually very easy to use. It's not very complex at all, just a couple of parameters. So as we increase the weight, the object becomes more opaque. It's harder to see through, as you can see. And if we drop it, we get less. We get more transparency here, and we can see through it a lot easier, as you can see. And we can always adjust the color here to something else, something that looks a little bit interesting here, and get ourselves some cool frosted colored glass that you could kind of see through, but you can't see through it that well. So this can be actually a pretty interesting effect, and it's just one of the built-in features of the architectural shader, which is simply fantastic. So I'll turn off use translucency for now. Go back to what I had before. Okay, so to finish off this this glass type material, because right now, I mean, it looks pretty interesting, but it could look better. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go down to the refraction parameters here, and under advanced refraction, I'm going to turn on use max distance. Okay, now we could use a max distance of 1 or 2, which is what we've used before, but let's go something with maybe 0.5, so we can make some dark glass that's a little bit harder to see through. And we'll use color at max distance, and we'll increase the brightness of that color a bit. Actually, let's open up the color chooser here and make some changes. And let's just move this around over here. Let's try to go with like, well, you can go with any color you want. I'm just going to kind of go with this beige type of color right here. But again, it's really up to you. You can just go with whatever color you want. So I got kind of this tan kind of beige color, or a sand kind of color there. And everything else looks pretty good. So let's hit render region here, see what we get. Okay, it looks pretty interesting. Up here it's very transparent, but down here at the base you can see that it's not so transparent. And if I save this image out and I turn off use max distance and do another render region, you can see what we end up with. Now pay attention to the bottom here, the bottom of the vase. And if we go to the right, to the before image, this is without using the max distance, without using advanced refraction parameters, and this is with using the advanced refraction parameters. As you can see, it's a huge, huge difference. I like the one on the right. I like this one a lot better than this one over here. I think this one looks much better, more believable, and it's more interesting, more realistic looking. Okay, it's behaving more the way that glass behaves, especially when it has some of those properties, some of that sort of color, and yeah, that looks a lot better. Fantastic. Okay, so I'm gonna say that I'm happy with that. Make sure that you turn the use max distance back on in the attribute editor. Let's collapse some of this stuff. Okay, pretty good. All right, I'm gonna say that I'm done with that vase material. Okay, so we've applied the glass materials and transparent materials to the wine glass, the wine itself inside the glass, and this vase. So that's going to do it for this video. So I'm going to end this video here, and in the next video we're going to talk about another topic here using the architectural shader, because again, this shader is so huge and so many things can be done with it. I'm just trying to show you as much stuff as I possibly can that you can do using this shader. So I'm sure you'll appreciate it. But I'll see you in the next video.